Good morning. Good morning. We good? Okay. It's election day, and I see a few of you have already wandered to your various precincts. Congratulations. Oh, yes. And I like that woo because we're going to start off with the cheer. So I know I feel the same way. I'm a night owl, not necessarily an early morning, but this is the old Greene County team trying this morning. So how many of you were cheerleaders back in the day? We got a couple cheerleaders. Ready? This is for everybody. And if you want to just do it real chill, I don't have a problem. Give me an H. Give me a U. Give me a D. Give me a D. Give me an L-E-E. What's it spell? Huddle. What's it spell? Huddle. What's it spell? Huddle. Give me an H. Give me a U. Give me a D. Give me a D. Give me an L-E-E. Give me an L-E-E. What's it spell? Huddle. What's it spell? We got a little beater. What's it spell? Huddle. What's it spell? Huddle. What's it spell? One more time. Give me an H. Give me a U. Give me a D. Give me a D. Give me an L-E-E. Give me an L-E-E. What's it spell? What's it spell? What's it spell? What's it spell? All right now. I'm finished. Is that okay? Wait a minute. Wait. Sometimes when you do stuff too good, this was a one and only performance. I cannot come every huddle and do the huddle cheer. So do you have that taped? Yes. All right, then. Okay. First of all, good morning again, and thank you so much for this opportunity really to talk about the Greene County ARPA program. I want to thank Cindy Stein and her team for all that they do to put this Huddle presentation together. And I am surprised, but very honored to be a part of the Huddle team this morning. So we're going to talk about the ARPA program. We're going to start off with a special thanks to the Greene County Commission. And I see a few of our commissioners this morning. I always want to acknowledge them because these federal initiatives like that take a lot of vision and leadership to make sure that we can successfully implement them. I think most of you know I've had a role the last several years, starting with the CARES program and now with the ARPA program being at Greene County. How and why they selected me, I'm still trying to figure that out, but it's been an honor and really a very enjoyable and hardworking time being a part of the team at Greene County. We also have a Greene County, what we call ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, internal team. And so we just have those names up there. I think, again, most of you are very familiar with this. And what I'd like to do in our few minutes this morning is talk about a few details about our program, and then also give you a little bit of a glimpse into the 2023 program, which we are still finalizing with the Greene County Commission. So this is just simply an executive summary, just in terms of giving you a bit of a background. I think we're all aware that Greene County received almost $57 million in terms of ARPA funding. And while that money has been extremely important, and it's nice to have that kind of a grant for any kind of public body, I always want to acknowledge that the reason for the ARPA funds, the reason for the CARES funding comes out of the really devastating challenging brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I never want to make it sound like this was just a fun, happy time, because I know people at Greene County, many people in our community, myself personally, we were all impacted in various ways by the pandemic. And so I always want to just take a minute to acknowledge how serious that was. While the CARES program was really kind of what I describe as a fire hydrant approach, because, I mean, if you think back to some of the beginning days of the pandemic, we didn't know what was going to happen from one day to the next. And so when the CARES funding came out during the Trump administration, the goal really was to get some emergency money out into all of our communities to address some of the immediate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The ARPA program funding under the Biden administration has had a slightly different approach, and that is really to look at economic recovery. We think to some extent we have understood the COVID-19 challenges in a lot of different ways. And this is looking at, now that we're in the pandemic, how do we get funding out into various sectors of our community to help with economic recovery? In other words, looking at going forward, addressing the impact of it, but also looking to the future in terms of how can our funds help our communities recover and get back, quote unquote, on their feet. So we'll talk about how we have kind of envisioned that $57 million in Greene County and responding to our community. So one of the things that we did, and when we talk about needs assessment, you know that many different entities in our communities actually conduct needs assessment, but we also wanted to do one. And by that, I'm saying many of you are familiar with the community focus report put out by the Community Foundation of the Ozarks. And before I go too much further, I know I talk fast, so if I say something you don't get it or don't understand, wave your hand, stop me. So in the same spirit of our cheer, we want to be engaged. We want to be informal this morning. So feel free to stop. If I say something that's not clear, just simply ask me to stop and just ask me, to make it a little bit more specific for you. I am more than happy to do that. So we developed an internal needs assessment questionnaire that was sent out in our community. Obviously, when we do these kind of instruments, we're not sure what the response rate is going to be, but we actually had about 1,700 residents throughout Greene County complete our needs assessment. And the goal of the needs assessment was really to ask our community residents, what did they feel were the top issues, the top concerns, the top needs that they identified. And before I go much further, I want to make sure that everybody knows Mark Meads and Skylar Crawford, who, well, previously they were ARPA interns, but Skylar, as I think most of you are beginning to know, has now come on board as a full-time Greene County staff person. So we're very excited about that. But anyhow, working with the two of them, we actually developed an instrument and then we sent that out throughout the community. And then we analyzed the results of that. So we also had a nonprofit listening session. We had those in the election center. We asked representatives from the nonprofit community to spend about an hour with us in kind of a focus group setting, and to also ask them, because they're on the front line of their organizations, what were the needs that they were seeing. So anyhow, that's kind of the background, if you will, of the needs assessment process. And these were the top priority categories identified. And that needs assessment, and most of what I'm saying, is actually online on the Greene County website under the ARPA button or the ARPA tab. But anyhow, just taking a minute to look at this, these are the top priority categories. And I'm sure for most of you, you would say there are really no surprises here. But in case you've never looked at these before or just thought about what this means for our community, this is what came out. And then we also analyzed this by all of our different communities. So when you go to that needs assessment survey, you can see, how did the Springfield residents respond? How did residents in Republic or Walnut Grove? We actually have it by every community as well as unincorporated Greene County. And generally, we don't see a lot of variation, but we do see, I guess I would say, in terms of the order of priorities, some differences by community. And that's interesting. And our goal was to help the needs assessment, utilizing that to help shape how our funding goes back out once we start doing the ARPA grant distribution process. Everybody with me so far? Give me an H. No, I'm just teasing. I'm teasing. I'm teasing. I'm just keeping you with us. I'm just keeping you with us. So initially, we working with the commission, we want to look at our total award, and then we want to think about how do we want to distribute those funds through the county and back out into our community. And one of the things I constantly acknowledge about our commission, they've always had the directive, we want to get these funds out into our community where citizens, where residents, where businesses were impacted in many different ways by the pandemic. And I always try to emphasize that they do not have to do this. Now, of course, there's a lot of federal legislation directing how the ARPA funding is spent, but Greene County, and maybe I hope I don't get the commission in trouble, Greene County could have spent, all of these funds, quote unquote, on itself. We do see some examples of that across the nation, but they've always had this idea, we want to make sure that our community gets funding as well. And so this distribution reflects that. And the reserve just simply means the commission was holding back some funding to say when we get towards the end of the ARPA program, if there's some things we've missed, if there's some things that have changed, how do we make sure that we have a few dollars available for that? So you look at the countywide, we did what we call community distribution to small business and nonprofit. And then we also encouraged the collaboration program, which we'll talk about more, which is our community impact program, the CIP. And again, all of these things we essentially created, developed. Some of this was based on our experience with the CARES program. Some of this was looking at the legislation from the ARPA program and looking at what are some of the ideas and strategies we want to employ at this stage of the pandemic to benefit our communities. So I just referenced the community impact program. So we had this idea. The legislation talks about transformative projects and encouraged communities to, in fact, embark about transformative projects. And so we had the idea of let's creating a pot of funds that will be utilized for long-term, as you see on the slide, transformational project. In other words, when we look back on these years, 5, 10 years from now, what might be some things that we have utilized the ARPA funds for that will still remain in our community? And what I mean by that is that obviously there are some things when we come to emergency assistance, like giving out food vouchers, motel stays, rent assistance. Those are things that, people benefit from, and then it's kind of the money's gone. But we also thought about what might be some things, whether it's capital projects, housing development, what might be some projects that will last and be in our community, as well as be a part of economic recovery. And so we actually had an RFP, request for proposal process, and we had a number of organizations respond to that. And these are the organizations that in fact were funded. And I'd like to just quickly mention these. And so the goal of these obviously was to have a long-term impact in our community. So Missouri State was doing a composite braided manufacturing facility. I'm still trying to figure out what that means, but it's a very fancy high-tech machinery. And that's actually under construction now on Boonville, going up towards the downtown square, but high-paying jobs for our community. The Family Justice Center, the Community Collaborative Impact Preservation and Sustainment Project. And so that's actually underway as well. And that's obviously an initiative of Greene County itself. Our Habitat Affordable Housing Program, creating more houses for the Habitat for Humanity program. I think most of you are familiar with the Habitat model. The Boys and Girls Club, they are looking at creating a new facility. The OTC, Center of Excellence for Airframe and Power Plant Maintenance. This is going to be out at the airport. And this is a facility to provide training for aircraft maintenance jobs, which are very high paying for our citizens, for our residents. Burrell Youth Behavioral Crisis Center. This was an initiative is an initiative the commission was very fired up about, and really looking at a facility which will be constructed to address the needs of kind of teens who are in the mental health crisis. Often now they're going to emergency rooms and then they're going back home, but still may be in that crisis stage. So this is a facility, and as they've described it to us, very unique on a national basis. And so when you use the word transformative, this is an excellent example of that. Ozark Empire Fairgrounds. How many of you all heard that we're getting some arena? Is it arena football? I see a couple of heads nodding. I don't know how exciting that's going to be. I've watched a few games, but it's just a whole different, football for me. But anyhow, there is actually an arena under construction at the Ozark Empire Fairgrounds, and we have put $5 million into that. In fact, they've drawn it down. It's actually out there being utilized. But this already is bringing economic impact to our community, even while it's under construction. There'll be a lot of youth education and agriculture. So they have multiple purposes. Sankofa, an affordable housing project on Commercial Street for what we call workforce housing, which is extremely important. And again, these things tie back to the needs assessment. Silver Springs Park on the north side of our city. There's a group of neighborhood residents proposing a multi-purpose community center. And then finally, the Council of Churches for their Level Up campaign for their new Council of Churches headquarters, which actually the ribbon was cut on that just a few weeks ago, and our commission was there as well. How much more time did I have, Ms. Stein? Okay, I better bring my phone up with me just because I want to stay on schedule. So these are our CIP funded projects. We think that these projects are extremely important. Some of these projects, of course, involve construction, so that's being done over a period of years. Another bellwether project of the ARPA funding is our Small Business Assistance Program. We did small business assistance with the CARES program as well. We did learn a few things from the CARES program, and so we made a few tweaks in our Small Business Assistance Program, and this was primarily done in 2022. I think you can see the criteria on the screen. And where's Justin? I know I saw Mr. Hill. He developed this amazing calculator formula. So in the online application that was actually developed, our IS department did an extraordinary job of providing technical assistance and support. Small businesses were able to go online, complete an application, and Mr. Hill's business calculator formula helped them to just kind of put within this formula their funding, their loss of dollars, and actually calculate what their need was. Obviously, there was a maximum amount of dollars they could get through the program, and that was based on how many employees they had. And I think you'll see as of April this month, we actually expended $3.657 million to 316 small businesses. And I think this is something that is so vital in our community because we know that small businesses are, in fact, the backbone of our community. And many of our small businesses have had a very, very difficult time for a myriad of reasons during the pandemic. Every awarded applicant was provided an end-of-the-year report to also document how the ARPA funds were expended. Okay, so at this point, just wave at me if you're still here. Angie, thank you. Somebody, okay, you're still here. Good. Any questions? Any comments? How soon will he be finished? Very soon. Yes, ma'am.
$6 million plus was spent on how many small businesses? 300 and something.
On how many small? Okay, just make sure we're clear. The commission actually awarded or kind of set aside funding buckets. And so the funding bucket is actually for the entire program. We took part of that funding bucket for 2022. And if the commission approves, authorizes, we'll use a part of that bucket or the rest of that bucket for a 2023 program. So we actually spent 3.6 million actually went out in the 2022 program. So 3 million on the slide, 657,000 has been spent to date.
Oh, I see.
Right, and that's originally 8 million budgeted for the program. Our goal was to have about 4.1 million for each year of the small business program. We used almost 3.7 million of that in 2022. So there is some additional monies left, but now we're proposing to the commission how much we may budget. Because you have to have a maximum of 50 employees, obviously there were some small businesses that were not eligible because they had more than 50 employees. Hopefully that makes sense. Thank you. And this is just a couple of examples. We won't go through this line by line, but Mark and Skylar also reached out in terms of those small business reports, asking businesses how, in fact, did that money help them? What did that grant do for your business? And that gives you kind of an example. This is Wells Tire and Auto. 8 Point Performing Arts, they actually indicated they would have closed if they did not get the help of the county. And then Robert, our PIO, has also done some videos, and I don't know if we'll have time, but we actually have one queued up for the Council of Churches, but he's gone out and done some videos. Our commission has also gone out to some of the small businesses that were assistant and actually asked those small business owners, how did this cash dollars, how did this money help you? We've had many emails come in from very grateful recipients saying how instrumental those funds were in our community. And this is just giving you a little bit of it's kind of an inside scoop. The commission has not got this yet, but we put together a hefty little report that we're sending them probably today or tomorrow with initial ideas for the 2023 small business program. So since you're our Huddle team, we want to let you in on some inside information. Look at your neighbor and say inside information. You're a VIP. So So part of what we're doing in this report is asking some programmatic questions because our goal at the county is to always improve. That's this whole Huddle opportunity. Like, how can we do things better? What did we learn? How did we grow? So we had an initiative called Small Business Navigators, where we actually contracted with several neighborhood organizations to assist us in going out in the community, knocking on doors, letting small businesses know there's some help available. I'll just tell you a secret. Sometimes entrepreneurs, people in the small business community, don't trust government. I'll let you know on this side. Don't trust government. They're just a little bit leery, like, oh, that's one of those federal programs. I know you'll get us just deeper in trouble. And so sometimes they have proven this through research, having some trusted neighborhood community groups that those small businesses know, have relationship with, having them to go out and knock on doors. And of course, we can't go knock on doors all day because we're trying to do what I'm describing to you. So we did use that with 2 organizations. So the recommendation is to continue that. And those navigators can even help them in filling out the application. We did have some small business owners. I hate to say elderly because I have some beautiful, hair on top of my head, but there were some people that were technologically, I don't want to use the word challenged, but constrained. And so in a few cases, they wanted to fill out paper applications. We had a few people come down to the commission office, Skylar and Mark, to work with them to just kind of manually complete their application. So again, you'll be surprised sometimes. Sometimes entrepreneurs are so busy doing their work, they don't have time to do applications. So they're doing them at 10 o'clock at night. When Karen was on board, she even helped a few online to just say, you started your application, you didn't complete it. They say, oh, I got so busy, I forgot. I started, I'm sorry. Let's finish that and let's get you some assistance. Again, should we increase the size of who's eligible for the small business program? Again, these are things that we are considering right now in terms of the 2023 program, just looking at what we've learned. And so there is a suggestion, maybe we will take up the eligibility to 60 employees, because small business can be defined by the Small Business Administration up to 500 employees, believe it or not. We've also had a nonprofit assistance program in 2022. In fact, Cindy Stein's office is still getting out some funding because that program started a little bit later. That started in August. And we had, as you can imagine, a tremendous response in terms of organizations applying for the nonprofit program. And we're getting out those resources. And I think all of you know that Greene County has an abundance of nonprofit organizations, all doing a really good job to assist citizens in our community. So again, the commissioners designated almost $6 million for this program for this initial round. So applications were received. We had an internal team that was up, we showed on the earlier slide. And then we also have a community advisory board. The community advisory board made recommendations on those nonprofit applications to the commission. And so you'll see that as of April this month, $6,153,000 has been awarded to 49 nonprofit organizations. All of those organizations have a grant agreement. They have to have documentation of all the funds in terms of the eligible awarded categories, and then the auditor's office really very, very, very detailed. Make sure that all of their receipts are in line with federal requirements, because all of this can be audited. So they do an extraordinary job of making sure people are doing what they're saying. So we have no concerns about that. So again, with the nonprofit program, we're looking at, what might be some things we're going to recommend and do differently with that in 2023 if the commission approves such a program. We do have a waiting list for the 2023 program from the small business community and from the nonprofit community. So one of the big questions, of course, nonprofits are asking us now, if they get funded this past year, can they apply again? And I worked in nonprofits many years before I do what I currently do. So I understand in the nonprofit world, it's competitive, and we're always looking for money. But I think right now we're suggesting that if you got money in the 2022, you would not be eligible unless you are maybe asking for staffing. And that's what this recommendation is around. And that's mainly because there were a number of nonprofits who were not able to get funding because we only had so many dollars appropriated. And we know a lot of those nonprofits were actually eligible and had good ideas as well. Yes.
Not been more beneficial to give less money to more nonprofits than so much to so few?
Okay, I think I get you saying, would it not have been maybe useful or beneficial to give less money and help more nonprofits? And that's a great question. I mentioned the advisory council was one of the entities that reviewed this. I don't want to bore you this morning, but we had this elaborate idea, which I think is an okay idea. We have what we call a tier system. Cindy's looking like that because she wasn't a big fan of our tier system. So we had 3 tiers of funding eligibility based on the size of the organization. We had somebody on the advisory council from the Community Foundation of the Ozarks. They typically recommend that a nonprofit, hopefully this is going to make sense, not get a grant larger than 20% of their budget, just in terms of the organization's capacity to be able to use those funds and kind of make sure that those funds are responsibly used. So part of what I'm saying by that is that we actually use that as a guide to generally, in most cases, limit the size of the funding. So we have these baby organizations, organizations that really have much smaller budgets. And so those grants generally are in the $5,000 to $20,000 category. So we did have a lot of organizations that in fact got smaller grants. And that group was very important to us because we know in the pandemic, there were a lot of isolated pockets in our community where there was sometimes these very small community-based organizations that actually had really entree into those communities. But in Greene County, we also have some fairly large players in the nonprofit community that have multiple $1 million budgets. And so they were eligible for a couple of $100,000. And so we really did have a scope or a span of sizes, but the advisory council, as well as the commission, did in some cases recommend what I would call significant size grants. There was a cap though. All of these grants had to be under 500,000 because that CIP program we talked about earlier, those grants started at 500,000. But I think that's obviously a good point and something we'll look at for the 2023 program. But there were a lot of small grants that were actually passed out. But we kind of looked at obviously what was the goal, what was the thing that they're proposing to do. And some things, because of just inflation and the cost of the world, some things that the nonprofits wanted to do, it did cost a lot of money. That was part of the impact of the pandemic. Some of the organizations had some really good requests, and they were asking for a couple $100,000 because that program, that need tied into our needs assessment. So, thank you. All right, and then this again, just so we look at how we prioritize the needs assessment in terms of the 2023 program. There were a lot of funding in our mental health categories, some in terms of homelessness on the unsheltered population in the 2022 program. So the idea is in 2023, should we look at maybe some other areas of the needs assessment and kind of have a focus on those categories for our nonprofit funding in 2023? And then the next thing I want to talk about, and I think we're coming to the close of these slides, is our county-wide program. And obviously for those of you who are part of the Greene County team, this is something very much relevant for you. So we have a county grant program to invest in not only what I would describe our community partners throughout the county, and this can be first responders, as well as our municipalities and quasi-governmental groups, but also for Greene County offices and departments. And so that application was an email to applicants, and they were given until February 15th. So this is a very much recent program. At the end of the application window, we received 35 applications from 26 organizations requesting a total of $14 million plus. So I believe the commission will be making some decisions in terms of this program in the next few weeks, and that's our hope. We've actually given them a summary of all of the applications. We had some very, very good proposals submitted. And then we also wanted to mention that Greene County already has benefited from the ARPA program in a number of ways, including the purchasing of two-way radios, investing in the Greene County Family Justice Center, covering administrative expenses. And these are just a few of the issues. And then 6 Greene County offices and departments submitted applications for funding through the 2023 county grant program. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to just mention. This was just one of the things that also is a guiding principle, which is described as equity in the ARPA program. That's actually baked into the legislation. So we also make sure that all of the applicants are making sure that they are aware of this principle and are utilizing this in their ARPA funding requests. So that is pretty much our presentation for Huddle Time this morning. Angie? Oh, wow. That's just brilliant, right? Huddle. And wait a minute. When I did the cheer, the L-double-E was more for the cadence, not that I didn't know how to spell. I wanted to make sure. It was just to go with the little beat. I want to make sure I clarified that. You're like, this guy's got 2 E's. What's wrong with him? Okay. Any questions in our 45 seconds we have left? You've been fantastic. Thank you, Cindy Stein. H-U-D-D-L-E-E. H-U-D-D-L-E-E.